So, if you're like thousands of other people in the last month, you're considering trying Pathfinder 2nd Edition for the first time, and you might be a player in that campaign, in which case you look at the 22 different class options available and freeze up with choice paralysis, because each of those is a subclass, and then each of those subclasses leads to certain feats and maybe different spells or subclass abilities that make it even more complicated to choose which class to play. So which one should you start with? Well, that's what I'm here to help you decide on. Howdy, my name is Nonat, and today I'm going to be going over my top 5 recommended classes for beginner players in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. These are going to be classes that don't offer quite as much choice, or maybe the choices they offer are just simpler to understand, both in concept and in gameplay. This does not mean the classes are going to be inherently simpler or held back by their simplicity, but they'll be a little bit easier to pick up quickly if you're just looking to get into the game to try it out without reading 3 paragraphs of how an oracle mystery works. So if this video helps you out, please do me a favor by leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel for more TTRPG content. And speaking of being a beginner to a new system, this video is sponsored by the Subversion TTRPG Kickstarter, a brand new system bringing you a blend of cyberpunk, fantasy, and community building. Subversion reached out to me and showed me what their game was about, and I was instantly hooked. I love the setting. It takes place in an alternate reality where the city of Babylon succeeded and basically carried forth 2,500 years into the future, where now the game takes place in Neo-Babylon, a cyberpunk downtown setting full of fantasy creatures. There's magic, there's technology, and there's a really cool innovation on the classic D6 pool system you might see in something like Shadowrun. Subversion, you only use the 3 highest D6 you roll, and as you improve your character, you don't get bonuses to your rolls, but rather the higher your skill is, the more D6 you roll. So you're not getting higher rolls, you just get more rolls as you improve. And when I said this game had a heavy focus on community, I meant it, because the community that your characters are a part of is its own player character. They haven't leaked to me exactly how this works, but it's definitely got me interested. It's going to have its own sheet, its own stats, and you're not only going to be having to succeed at what you and your fellow players want to accomplish, but you will also need to keep your community safe, intact, and thriving in the deceitful world of Subversion. If a fantasy cyberpunk world where combat is not the only solution sounds intriguing to you and your friends, click my link in the description and go back to the Subversion Kickstarter. It looks rad, I'm going to be backing it myself, and I can't wait to check it out when it launches. Thank you so much, Subversion, for sponsoring this video. Let's talk beginner classes. Starting off is a character that's actually incredibly versatile and kind of goes against everything I started this video with. I'm talking about the Rogue. Now, at first glance, the Rogue might seem like a little bit much for a new player, but bear with me. The Rogue is useful in a variety of situations, and if you're new to the game, you might not know exactly where to use what skill on your character sheet. Well, with the Rogue, you have the freedom to become a jack of all trades, useful in almost any situation, and beyond that, you're not sacrificing any of your combat capabilities either. Things like sneak attack and debilitating strike come right as part of leveling up, and you don't even need to worry about not getting them. It's going to be really satisfying for a new player who's trained in over half the skills in the game to be able to take part in almost every situation. I've been a new player at a table before where everyone else knew what they were doing, and I just sort of threw my character together, and I just didn't really know what skills did what or how to partake. Luckily, as a rogue with all of their massive amounts of skill bonuses, you can become trained in almost every skill so fast, or become a master in quite a few of them still being applicable to most situations. Also, come on, whenever you get sneak attack off in combat, it's always hugely satisfying. It's a great way to hook a player in without completely overwhelming them with information and allowing them to be useful regardless of the context of the campaign. Next up is the Cleric. I'm sure tons of you saw this one coming. It's a fantastic class, super simple on the surface, but there is plenty of Cleric to explore. This class can be as simple or complicated as you want. If you want to be a full-on heal machine with those bonus extra spell slots at level 1, throwing out 6 heals a day at level 1, just keeping everyone alive, you can absolutely do that. Or you can get even more creative. The Cleric actually rewards creative spell selection because they have access to their entire spell list. Unlike something like a wizard, you don't need to pick a few spells at level 1 to know and then not have access to the rest. The Cleric can try out some spells. Oh, you didn't like those ones? Prepare different ones the next day. On top of that, having a deity that grants you your powers is such a great role play anchor. There's no easier way to get into character than to say, okay, I worship this deity, these are my tenets, this is what my deity represents, as such, my character should embody those themes. Beautiful, I have a baseline, I can go from there. You know, I'm a cleric of Gozra, I love nature, that guy's setting a tree on fire, I set him on fire. To top it all off, the Cleric only has 2 different subclasses, making them one of the easiest and simplest characters in the game to set up, even with their spell selection. The Ranger is one of the most satisfying martial classes in the game, and it's pretty simple to set up. It has one of the most satisfying gameplay loops in the Pathfinder 2e system. You hunt your prey, and you beat them to death. Did they die? Hunt somebody else and beat them to death. Obviously, the Ranger can do a whole lot more than just hunt and shoot people, but even if that's all you do and all you want to do, you will be successful with it. The Ranger, a lot like the Cleric, is not a mentally taxing class to play. It's pretty easy to understand what you can do, but if you dig a little deeper and want to flesh out your combat options, you can, once again making the Ranger a class that is as simple as you want it to be, or as complex as you want it to be. Also, if they're new to Pathfinder 2e from a system like D&D 5e, it's really cool to see a Ranger that can adequately use something like a greatsword as their primary weapon. Precision Ranger greatsword build? Beautiful. Next up, we have the Bard. See, I wanted another spellcaster on this list, and I almost went for Sorcerer, but I felt like the Bloodline system could have been a little bit overwhelming for new players, so I went with the next closest thing, and that's the Bard. The Bard is super friendly to new players, and similar to the Ranger, it has a simple gameplay loop you can get into should you choose to. You inspire courage and maybe cast a spell, or you inspire courage, move, and use a ranged weapon, something along those lines. And speaking of inspire courage, assisting your fellow players when you're the new player feels incredible. I can't count on my hands how many times I've seen a new player playing a Bard use Inspire Courage, and that turned like the Barbarian's hit into a critical hit, causing them to double their damage, one-shotting the boss and just making it a cakewalk. And everybody, they lift the Bard on their shoulders, because without them, that crit wouldn't have happened, or they would have missed instead of hitting. That Inspire Courage changes the game, and I think it is an amazing morale boost, both for the party and for the new player themselves to feel appreciated in the new game. Now, I will say, they're still a spellcaster. They do need to pick a few spells from their spell list, but also, unlike a wizard, once they pick those spells, they can just cast them at will. They don't need to prepare them specifically, and once they've picked their, 3 spells at level 1, that's it. They don't have to worry about any other spells, and just use those 3 spells in any order they want a certain number of times per day. And the 5th and final class for Pathfinder 2e beginners, I'm sure you all saw this coming. It's obviously the Oracle. No, I'm kidding. I'm not that cruel. It's the fighter. It's obviously the fighter. There's nothing I can say here that hasn't been said 100 times before, but I will say it again anyway. The fighter is freedom incarnate. Right at level 1, expert with every single type of weapon outside of advanced weapons, meaning you can use anything you want, and you can switch between weapons whenever you want. You want to have a halberd, 2 short swords, and a crossbow all at the same time, and you can switch between them at no penalty? play a fighter. Sure, certain feats give you new options to use with certain weapons, like with dual wielding you could take double slice, but that doesn't make you any worse at using that halberd or using that crossbow. Now, I will say, once you're level 7, you do specialize in one type of weapon, whether it be clubs or bows or swords, and you get +2 more to hit with those weapons specifically, meaning you'll want to use them more often. But this doesn't make you any worse with the other weapons. Even if you use a weapon that's not in your specialized group, you are just as accurate as every other class in the game. Literally, no matter how you build your fighter, it will work out. You can make them dexterity-based, you can make them strength-based, you can even make them more defensive with sword and board. There's like 1,000 different ways to build the fighter, and they're all viable. And that's what makes the fighter work so well for a new player. Even if you don't min-max, even if you're a little confused at character creation and maybe you mess something up, I guarantee your fighter will be able to keep up with the rest of the party. The only thing they lack is skills. You're going to get like 4 skill proficiencies and that's it, and most of them are going to be athletics, acrobatics, and maybe sneak. So good luck in roleplay, use your words as best you can, but once combat breaks out, hold on, because you're going to kill some people. And those are my 5 recommended classes for beginners to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. Are there any classes I missed? Do you think any of these classes are actually too complicated for beginners? You know I love hearing your takes on the subject of these videos. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.